mind watching alone.
Yeah.
I don't have to go to a party.
Yeah.
It's just, you watch the ads.
I went ahead and shot us as we wait for Brock. I went ahead and shot us live.
We can go live.
Yeah.
Rick, I was just saying this weekend was weird because they added the extra week, I guess, to let the teams prepare, but I always felt like it was too long. Like I want the Super Bowl to be this Sunday and then we're done, rather than just like waiting the extra week. But here we are.
Yeah.
Real Friday.
Well, back in Real Fridays. I'm Rick Roque and Jeremy Potter. We're two of the more consistent, or really the key leaders of the podcast. And then historically, and then Brock is he sort of meanders in when he does, and here he comes. So Brock Cassidy, myself, and Jeremy Potter, we started Real Fridays several months ago just to focus on real topics, rumors in the industry of housing, real estate, and mortgage, and market events. Talk about technology, innovation, capital markets, just different trends that's affecting it. And we keep this sort of a professional insider kind of podcast. Kind of a Joe Rogan without the marijuana, at least yet. We haven't introduced marijuana into the podcast yet, but that's a clear possibility. But we invited Rob Chrisman, who we all know and respect, and some of us love, maybe, to become part of the the podcast and the conversation. So Rob, welcome, man.
Thank you. I had a quick question though.
Yeah.
Sure.
So what's the name of this session? What's the name of this podcast?
It's called Real Fridays.
So when you talk about Real Friday, was the first thing that you mentioned talking about rumors in the industry?
So in part, like respectful rumors that we can talk about, let's say, you know what I mean? Like, we definitely don't divulge any sort of insider information, but we talk about what the press is talking about and see what different thoughts are, that's happening. But nothing that crosses the line, but enough to create a fun sort of, conversation about what's happening in mortgage, housing, and real estate.
Real rumors or non-real rumors.
Well,
yeah,
I think Rob, I think Rob, one of the things we're finding, and I'd be curious your perspective on this, is there's a lot of really important things being said, but they kind of get said the same on every show. So if you're going to talk about, maybe a good example that you and I have talked about would be like millennials and trends around like first-time home buyers, millennials, Gen Z. It's great stuff. It's really good content. But you turn on a podcast or you turn on a LinkedIn post, it's a lot of very, very similar content often. And so what we were thinking here was, how do we talk about aspects of some of the things we hear about, companies, technologies, trends, that not necessarily like full-on rumors, but things that like maybe don't get said all the time in other spaces, because there's a lot of very similar things being said. Like, I don't love doing the interest rate conversation on this show because it gets done everywhere. We see interest rate content in a lot of places, and there's people way more expert at it. You in particular, others. So I don't really necessarily bother with that. So we're trying to just have a real conversation with some of the things that maybe don't have a home or an expert in other verticals.
So you want to talk about like the demise of the regional manager?
Great.
Sure.
That's a good place to start.
Yeah,
That'd be exactly the type of thing. Yeah.
It's a good place to
Unless you're a regional manager.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, we saw, Caliber laid off very publicly. It's not anything that not everyone is talking about. But, Caliber, got rid of much of or most of its divisional leadership and regional leadership in the last few days. Just in an effort to, just like every mortgage company in the country, trying to figure out ways to save basis points and streamline to make money. Cause it's a brutal, I don't want to say it's brutal, but it's been brutal. What are your thoughts on the regional manager and the future of that individual?
Well, by the way, are we live?
Yeah.
We are live.
Oh, wow. I would have. I guess I would have done nothing differently.
Yeah. That's how we roll.
Brian, thanks for the nice word there. I think you mistyped it though. It should have been lowered significantly.
Yeah.
So the regional manager, you look at that model, and the fact of the matter is, really, what is the purpose of a regional manager? And I know and admire plenty of, quote, regional managers or divisional managers or whatever managers you'd like to call them. And the fact of the matter is, the question is, if you are the owner of let's say a regional or a national mortgage bank, or a vendor for that matter, and when you're trying to recruit people, oftentimes if you're recruiting a loan officer, the loan officer will say, well, I'll come on board, but I want to be more than a loan officer. I want to be a branch manager. And if you're bringing a branch on, the branch manager will say, well, I want to be more than just a branch manager. I want to be a regional manager, or a regional manager coming on, they want to be a divisional manager. I think that's human nature to want to improve your place. If you're going to make a move, sure, money is one thing, but also status and responsibility are something that people usually want. And so you end up in a recruiting war, as we saw in 2020 and 2021, even into 2022, 2023, whatever. When you're up against other companies and you're trying to bring people on board, there's this job responsibility creep, and you end up with people who, might be regional managers or divisional managers. And then the question is, are they pulling their weight? And also, how are they being incentivized? Are you just handing out basis points, or is it based on, quote, the profitability of your region and how much impact you have on the profitability? What does your region look like in terms of price concessions, in terms of rate lock extensions, in terms of turnover, in terms of delinquencies, so on, so on, so on. There are metrics that you can measure based on profitability, but I would venture a guess, and this is totally unscientific, to say that a lot of, quote, regional managers or divisional managers aren't incentivized based on profitability. It's so much easier just to do basis points of production and call it a day. And when you have layer upon layer of management in this kind of environment where margins have been shrinking, volumes have been shrinking, volumes are expected not to rally anytime soon, and you're looking at cutting costs, well, bringing that, quote, regional manager on in the past, a year or two or three ago, unless they're actively recruiting and bringing people on, if they're just kind of resting on their laurels, then why keep them on? And so if I'm the owner of a mortgage bank or a vendor, like I said, you really have to be careful in this environment, especially looking at it from an ownership perspective. Is this person pulling their weight? And if not, maybe they can find more success elsewhere.
Yeah, right on. I think one of the things I came away from the MBA's IMB conference with, it sounds directly related to this analysis that a CEO or a leader would want to do, a capital markets leader would want to do, is this. These are fundamentally sales and marketing organizations, right? The money's a commodity. We know that. In large part, the technology is becoming a commodity. People are popping up and saying, like, I can deliver you the same experience as anything else. Proprietary is good, but not necessarily the differentiator ones. So the only differentiator out there is your sales strategy. And if your sales strategy is human beings, distributed retail, getting referrals from real estate agents, especially in this market, then that infrastructure, the way you look at those people, the way you incentivize them, the way you structure them, how you get more of those referrals than the guy next door with the same exact technology and the same exact money, is these people. And so that's all you got. And so how you cut costs, how you structure that to be efficient, and how you differentiate the people seems to be the play right now. I mean, that's what the next year or two is, and that's about it if you're an IMB.
People, personnel, just can't get away from it. Jeremy, you were talking about taking 2 weeks off for the between the the football games leading up to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
In part, yeah, sure, that's a media thing or an advertising thing, and kind of builds up some momentum. But I've also heard that if you have people who are injured, players who are injured, both teams want to field their best squads, and the 2 weeks, in effect, in some cases, gives the teams time to rest up and potentially field their best squads. So, something to think about.
Yeah. That's like this. That's this moment we're in, right? If you're actually, there's been this like down cycle in the market that it's kind of like a bye week. Is what Rob, like, it's like, hey, we're in this bye week. We got to figure it out because the big game is coming up. And if we have 6 months, 8 months, maybe even a year, are we actually improving in that time? Are we actually game planning? Are we actually getting healthier? Or are we just literally holding our breath and waiting for the big game to come back around?
Right. And when you're dealing with mortgage banking, whether you're a bank or a credit union or IMB or a broker or whoever, there's not really there's no bye week, there's no bye month, you're going and going and going, and there's no kind of resting. If you want to tread water for a while, you're going to get passed. So anyway, I thought I would bring it back to the mortgage world there, trying to keep it relevant here.
Well, I actually was going to say that the bye week, or the analogy there, what people wait for, is going to be really rates, right? I was on a call yesterday with a mid-market player, $600 million sort of mid-market enterprise, as I call it, independent mortgage bank.
Is that a month or a year?
A year, right? So I just
$50 million a month.
Yeah. And in January they did 25 million. Right. Lowest in like the company's history. Right. And here's an organization that did in 2020 did about 2.5 billion. Right. It kind of flexed itself. And at that time they had, talking about people, 300 employees at 2.5 billion. So they, at the time they made $20 million, right? And then in 2021 they did 2.9 billion. They added about 200 employees. Now they're close to 600 employees, and about 250 employees more. And then they made a little bit less, but they made $10 million. Great. They about 40 basis points, right? Well, from 2021 to 2022, they didn't make adjustments, right? As many of us didn't, and as many mortgage companies didn't. So in 2022, they lost $5 million because they had at that point, coming out of 2022, they had 400 employees doing about $1 billion in business, right? So then at the end of 2023, they did 650 million, right? They did it just over 600 million. And they ended up losing another $6 million, right? So basically 2022 and 2023, they lost all the profit that they did in 2021, right? That $10 million they made in 2021 completely evaporated, right? The $20 million that they made in 2020, once you do your dividends, you take money off the table, they just had to put in another $4 or $5 million into the company to kind of keep things, rolling. It's a total scramble. And the only strategy in place for this organization is, well, we hope that, volume's going to rebound, right? So they're going to try to cut their way to prosperity, cut their way to profits, right? With really a hope and prayer that production will save them come April, May, and June, with an expected rate improvement during that time frame, right? And the challenge is there's not a lot of strategy behind that. They weren't talking efficiencies. They weren't talking about their payroll costs last year were over $10 million, $11 million, right? For a small company that did $600 million. So LO comps out of whack, fixed overheads way out of whack. I'm sure their leases are way out of whack. There's just so many different areas to adjust in organization as we've gone through what we've gone through, another 2013 or 2018, 2023 kind of cycle. But there's no discussion of technology. So talking about technology investments, Brock and Jeremy, that's completely off the table, right? It's a pure path to profitability driven by outside factors, production in a rate environment.
So let me ask the question this way, Rick. I didn't mean to cut you off,
Yeah,
but I think you're onto something really good. Rob, does that individual have any options at that point? Because we're kind of suggesting, like Rick's framing it up like, hey, you got all this stuff. Yeah, like I think you used the phrase out of whack. As far as all comp goes, but I'm starting to work on this theory that actually that person doesn't have a ton of option. There isn't a lot for them to do other than cutting people and then try to make do with what's left. Do you hear from IMBs? Do you hear from mid-market players that they have any options?
No, but we don't want everybody heading to the funeral home after this phone call. So we need to put a positive spin on things. Jonathan here mentions, the human component is the only truly unique selling point any of us have. I would tend to agree with that. Rick, while you were talking about this person, this client,
this IMB.
Yeah, this IMB that you were talking to, it brought back the scene in the, what is it, Dr. Strangelove, where the fellow, not T. Boone Pickens, but somebody, he's riding the bomb down toward Russia, saying Yahoo, to obliteration. And I should put that clip in my commentary. But really, it reminded me to ask you, does this company, did they retain their servicing? Because servicing,
they don't service.
What's that? They
don't service.
Well, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And so Jonathan's point, the human component. Yeah, the human component is huge. Product, price, service, right? The products are fairly uniform. There's not, there are some interesting products going on out there, but for the most part, you got Fannie, Freddie, FHA, VA, throw in some bond loans, throw in some government. Throw in some jumbo, whatever it might be, some ARM loans, whatever. But generally speaking, the products are very similar. The pricing, everyone's looking at the same mortgage-backed security market. And maybe some companies are playing around with the value of servicing or the accounting or whatever it might be. But in general, pricing is very similar. I'm not hearing, oh my God, they're a point better consistently every day, because if they were, they would be having, they would be some other company up the street would be getting all the market share. So the pricing, all right, here we are with the price. That leaves service. And to Jonathan's point, it's service. And when I talk to successful companies and successful loan officers, it's not a glamorous thing. It's not a glam profession. Jeremy didn't wake up and, in Acapulco and, wait, to swim in the bay and then come back and have a Bloody Mary. No, it's a grind. And I would argue that the people who have been in the business for some years realize that, and they realize the farther that 2020 and 2021 disappears in our rear view mirror. I'm kind of not, Rick, not to belittle what you were talking about, but you know what? That was then. At this point, that's almost 4 flipping years ago.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, I'm a Golden State Warriors fan. Championship team. Well, that was some years ago. This year, it's like, I don't care what you did 5 years ago. What are you doing this year? I don't care about what you did in a totally different environment when rates plunged and loans were falling from the sky, because you know what? That entirely different. If you go back to 2016, 2018, 2019, as industry veterans are inclined to do, it's similar to where we are now, more so. But the big issue is that the number of units that companies are doing has declined. Loan amounts have gone up, but the number of units has gone down. So it seems slower than where we were in 2018 and 2019. So you can talk about 2020 all you want, 2021, and everybody was making money. Margins were plush. You couldn't hire people fast enough. It was, just such an unusual time. Now it's back to the grind. And now it's back to the people that you have. And what are they doing about it? If you have a loan officer, if you have a sales manager, have they put in minimum requirements? Okay, Jeremy, welcome on board. We want you to do a minimum of 2 loans a month. Can you do 2 loans, Jeremy? Come on, I know you can. 4 loans, whatever it might be. And if you don't hit it, well, you know what? What are we going to do about it? And some very difficult decisions need to be made. So when you ask about, am I hearing anything that IMBs are doing that's, boldly different or whatever? No. But to put a positive spin on this, the MBA is talking about $1.5 trillion or $2 trillion worth of business. I don't know how many units that is, but somebody's got to do that. Somebody's got to do that business. And it may as well be people on this call. And the vendors may as well help those companies do that business. So, it's a grind.
Yeah, I believe the Fannie Mae projection is, at least at least from a purchase perspective, I think that Fannie Mae is saying, 4.2 million financed home sales, non-cash financed home sales. So to your point, there's that number to think about going at. I think the thing that frustrates me, or maybe to put it in the perspective you were just saying, Rob, is because I can be as optimistic as the next person, but I want to see that effort. I want to see creativity in what you said. And here's what I mean by that. I like to go to the physical fitness industry as a comp for mortgage. And what to put it in the perspective I think you were saying, Rob, is there's no substitute for the hard work. There's no substitute. There's no easy button for the hard work, for the grind. And in the physical fitness industry, we know diet and exercise is the thing. There's no question. It's diet and exercise. That's what works. But there's about 12,000 different ways to implement that in your life. Some people use CrossFit. Some people go for a walk. Some people go for a bike ride. Some people go for a spin class. Some people go for a swim. So the way you apply diet and exercise for your customer, the customer you're attracting, can be a big difference. And their industry has done a really good job saying everybody knows it's diet and exercise, but here's all the different ways you can accomplish your goal with us, and then pulling in those customers. I feel like IMBs, we do a bad job. We know what the answer is, but we don't have a lot of ways to differentiate CrossFit from taking a walk, from going swimming, and pull in the right people. These organizations, I think, to your point, that manager, the regional manager, the sales manager that we're talking about, how do they make themselves valuable in the org? Creating that sense of who we are and who we do business with best. And that's one of the things I think frustrates me, but there's huge opportunity there.
Jeremy, that's a great point. That's a great point. I like the physical fitness industry because if I were to say to the average person, hey, by the way, is that are those Bloody Mary? What are mimosas? Rick, do you have a like a bingo thing where like the number of sips that Jeremy takes? Jeremy's staying hydrated here.
I'm staying hydrated. Seltzer water with a lemon, but it is in my Shellbeck's glass from Manhattan Beach. So
that's a great point. Seltzer water. So if I were to talk to my grandparents or great grandparents or even my parents and say, hey, look at this bottle of Fiji water. It's $5. My mother would accuse me of lying. $5 for that bottle of water? Yeah, Mom. Hey, my mom's long deceased, but Mom, you know what? They're selling somebody came up with the idea of selling water in bottles and charging, you can get it for free out of the tap, she would say, why is somebody paying $1, $2, $5 for whatever? And or you look at the inventor of the fizzy water machine, like sit on your kitchen counter. Have you seen those? It's like, whatever they're called. And so why should I go out and spend a bunch of money on a can or bottle of the same thing that I could have in my own kitchen? Baby carrots. Who came up with baby carrots? What the heck is that? Like, it's a carrot, gosh darn it, but yet you're able to charge more for the baby carrots and get people fired up about eating carrots again. That's great. When you talk about those things in terms of mortgage banking, if you were to ask the average person, hey, we need to, people need to buy homes and they need money to buy homes, figure it out. Well, their first inclination would probably be, should I start by hiring an ops crew or start by hiring a production crew? If I hire production, who's going to underwrite? If I hire the underwriters and all that first, what are they going to underwrite? So but that's kind of the thinking, Jeremy, is that they will go about redoing the same model, as opposed to thinking, let's design something totally different.
Yeah. Rob, it's funny. Someone else called me the other day and he said, Rick, he goes, I have a few $1,000,000. And he goes, Rick, I have this great idea. No one's doing it. I wanted to start a mortgage bank. I want to acquire a small shell. I'm going to make it super lean. So our pricing is going to be great. Our compensation is going to be really high for the LOs, but it's going to be super lean. We're not going to have middle managers. We're going to have a really flat structure. We're going to have good execution, and we're going to outcompete all the big ones that are, full of bureaucracy or whatever the case may be. And I'm saying to myself, great. There's nothing revolutionary about what you said. There's nothing new about what you said. What you are essentially saying is you want to try to be as efficient as possible, embrace technology. You want to get, you really want to be as judicious as possible in choosing who, what your comp structures are for managers, if you will. Because at some degree, you need oversight. So you need sales managers and sales leaders and business leaders to work to nurture the business from, lesser experience or loan officers that might be struggling. But what you're saying is you just want to be judicious about how you're spending money, and no one is doing it. Insofar as that's true, what you're saying is super revolutionary. But there's really nothing revolutionary.
That's every earnings call for every public company is getting flatter, getting more efficient, getting this, getting that. So yeah, that's funny.
So to Jeremy's point, I like that sports analogy, Jeremy. Let's go back to where we were talking about the Super Bowl or playing football. What, your goal is to, on offense, is to move the ball from the 20-yard line, 25-yard line, down the field to score a touchdown. Is there room for revolutionary thought in the game of football or baseball or basketball? Put the ball in the hoop, score more points than the opponent. If you look at mortgage banking, yes, you have technology certainly that can enter into it. But just like football, baseball, basketball, tennis, you're dealing with rules. Oh, I can't have a tennis racket that's 5 feet by 5 feet that has a little engine on it. Oh, I can't. So I've got to use that. Oh, I've got to use a football. Oh, I've got to use. I can only stay within bounds of the field. Oh, the baseball. I have to use this bat, this baseball. With mortgage banking, because you have the technology component and the personnel component, that's cool, but you still have to adhere to the rules that govern the industry and the regulators come in and so forth and so on. But going back to the original question about, am I seeing anything really revolutionary and exciting? Here's David saying AI is coming. That's cool.
The one question though about AI is AI doesn't have a relationship. So you're building relationships with loan officers, referral, financial planners. And it's not to say that AI, I think AI will play an incredible, will really drive accuracy in consumer education on product availability, and something that's super tailored to each and every consumer's circumstance. But as Dave Savage says, and a lot of others, I think it's just going to evolve, kind of the evolving role of the LO, in as much as versus just eliminate the LO. I mean, how long have we said for the last 30 years, Rob, that the realtor is going away, right? I mean, ever since I got in the market in 2000, that's been the plan. We got to get rid of the realtor. And if anything, over the last 23, 24 years since, and certainly your time in this business goes back further, it's like the realtor is almost become even more relevant to some degree. They kind of stubbornly remain at the center of this transaction, regardless of the technology or the innovations that get.
Because if I'm a buyer or a seller, I want somebody else in my corner. If I'm a first-time home buyer, I can't just go, I don't know what to look at with this house. I don't know what to look at in time. I don't know. I want that realtor.
Yeah.
Right.
So the one thing that's been stuck in my mind is, if we take what Rick said and Rob, what you just said, and we play that out from an innovation perspective, then what we're really saying is, we, in the mortgage industry at least, we were wrong about some key assumptions. And I feel like the person at the poker table, when you realize there's always a sucker at the table, and if you look around and you can't spot it, it might be you.
Story of my life.
What I would ask my team when I was running an innovation team, what I would ask them is, how do we flip this question on its head and get at some new insights, get at some new information? And here, I think the question that's been nagging me is it actually the mortgage folks that are most at risk, not the real estate folks? Because sometimes when I joined the industry, there was this perception of he who has the gold makes the rules type of idea. And I think for a long time, people applied that to the mortgage bank, the mortgage company. But what has happened over the last decade is, he who has the gold is actually the RMBS investor.
Yeah.
Not the mortgage originator. So what's really happening is the RMBS investor, the gold, is finding its way to the consumer, to the real estate agent, in different ways that are threatening to mortgage. And it's actually not, we provide this valuable function, getting the money right and getting the money right to the table. Turns out, fast forward 10 years, that's been all commoditized in a way that what happens when this key piece up front that we thought was vulnerable ends up being the strongest part, and the money finds its way in different ways to that point. I think that's the way I would ask the question if I was a capital markets person or an innovation person trying to guess what happens next. I don't know if that resonates or if that's a true threat, but and I'm not trying to take us back to the funeral home. I'm just saying that it's a creative way to get at what you mentioned earlier, which is, how do you think differently about your proposition? How do you think differently about approaching the market? How do you think differently than your competitor across the street about structuring your offer, your thing that's going to bring people in?
Rob, what do you think? Go ahead, Rob.
No. I'm just, we lost Brock.
We're down to 3, and then there were 3.
Brock didn't say one. What does Brock do for a living, by the way? Who is Brock?
I'm surprised he didn't mention Newzip.
Yeah, well, I teed him up. So his company actually just won the Lending Tree sort of innovation award recently, and it's a relatively new organization, maybe 2 or 3 years old, I think. It's called Newzip, and what they do is it's a technology that they that sort of connects the realtor in the loan officer in sort of a unique way that they've gained some traction with community banks, credit unions, and a number of fairly large mortgage companies. So
Newzip.
Yeah, Newzip.
Yeah, talk about doing things differently. Their thesis is, with a consumer direct platform in particular, but a lot of these digital platforms, if you can get pre-approved first, you become a real estate lead. So the more times people are bringing in someone, getting them certified, approved, pre-approved, pre-qualified, whatever your institution calls it, you then need software or connectivity to get you to the right real estate partner. And now the mortgage company becomes helpful as a lead generator for their referral partners, as opposed to the other way around. But you got to get pre-approved first. You got to get pre-approved first.
It's funny. Carrie Birch, he says, the vehicle will be, the loan itself will be just the press of a button, no relationship needed. Agree on the realtor and the appraisal and the inspection. Mortgage lending will be online and digital. Not as much change with the mortgage industry since I started in 1988. It's funny. Jeremy and I were talking about this recently, saying that when was the last true technology innovation, like a real disruptive, like movement in how we do business? And my thought was ePass, back in 98, when Genesis came out with the way of sort of pulling credit and being able to interconnect all these third-party services. And prior to that, I was thinking like Windows, when Windows 95 came out and Calyx went from DOS to Windows 95. Since then, it's been like little tweaks, it really hasn't been, taking a piece of paper and taking a photo of it. There really hasn't.
When did the forward pass come along? Right.
Yeah.
When did they start playing night games? When did baseball fields start having lights? Oh, that big game changers like that. When did they invent the 3-point line? Yeah, I haven't seen. That's a great point. I haven't seen I've seen a lot of tweaks, but nothing. I would imagine. I tell people, they talk about technology, and I'm very much a Luddite. I freely admit that, but at some point, I would imagine that you'll be able to put your palm on a machine, and they'll identify you, and you'll read out a credit. I mean, your credit. I mean, you'll be able to do a loan with just a palm print. But then, damn it, the moving van doesn't show up for 2 weeks, so I don't need a loan now. I need it, let's spread it out for 2 weeks.
Hey.
So, there's always this human element that enters into things.
Yeah, Rob, I was thinking of that too. Like you think of people talking about innovation, and they'll talk about making the underwrite faster. Oh, the underwrite's faster. I pull these vendor services faster. But actually the question to ask is like, does a purchase need to get any faster? Is that where you're going to differentiate, making a purchase faster? And I think what you're saying is the answer is actually no. The purchase is now fast enough because other factors, like the seller having to vacate the house, like ends up being packing. The whole timeline. Yeah, that ends up being the timeline in many cases. But go ahead.
I was going to say, shortcuts are good though. Although companies that try to create shortcuts, it's really rough going. I heard about this company. I think it's called NewZip, and I heard they just went out of business this morning. And so, when you,
I wish we had somebody. I wish we had somebody here to talk about that.
Yeah, it's been a tough day out here. Yeah.
What? Did I say something wrong? Anyway,
it's Real Fridays.
Sorry, Brock. While you were away, I
got I deserve it. I got the hard reset and missed 5 minutes of Real Fridays. I hate to think what Rick said while I was gone, but
it's not. Yeah. I don't think you have to worry about what I said. I think you got to worry about what Rob says.
That's that's good. That's good.
You know what? So Jeremy, I don't know. I send out this daily commentary, and I don't know. Maybe half a dozen people read it every day. I don't know, maybe more. But today, in my lead paragraph, I talk about Elon Musk.
Yeah,
I don't know if you read it, but Elon Musk. If you drive down the road, there are Teslas. If you turn on your internet, is there a Starlink? And now he owns a company that's putting Neuralink things in brains. Okay. So those are changes. When you talk about technology, those are big changes. Are you an Elon Musk fan, or are you worried about Elon Musk?
I wouldn't say I'm worried about it. I'm definitely not in that camp. But I also struggle with being a fan because I'm such a people person. So it's like the art versus the artist problem that you have sometimes. But one of the things I bring up a lot about Elon Musk, and in your opening paragraph today, this popped into my head, which is a lot of times we talk about innovation as if it completely 100% replaces the establishment, as if it completely overcomes what exists. And with Elon Musk, I think the important thing to remember for financial services, for our industry, is that Tesla, I guess I'll put it this way, GM and Ford do not make EV commitments to the public and to the government that they're going to go full EV in the next 10, 15, 20 years, whatever the commitment was, unless Tesla exists. So GM and Ford aren't going out of business, but they don't make that type of investment. They don't make that type of change. They don't make that type of commitment, but for Tesla. And so you can win a space and you can move entire industries, entire people groups, entire ways that things happen without having to win 100% market share to do it. You can move the establishment. And I think that's more of what I'm thinking when I say innovation in this space is something that moves the establishment and forces them to make a commitment.
Well, when you say like Rocket would be a good example of that with sort of the innovations around, online qualifications. It seems like when Rocket really first went to market, 7-8 years ago, with their big Super Bowl commercials around, press a button, get a mortgage. It seemed like that really moved the POS. The POS market essentially didn't exist before Rocket did that. Right. And it's kind of an interesting point where a single technology, a single mover can really put a tremendous amount of competitive pressures on everyone else to make that same move. And because I don't think Blend would exist if it weren't for Rocket having done that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like affects everyone else just as much. It's like a step function for the whole industry, not just for the one innovator. So it's always interesting to see.
And
Rob,
I think one last thing, Rob, I
Yeah.
think the thing I'm jealous of that you'll appreciate from our conversations about Elon Musk is that when you do something big that works at the level that Tesla worked, you kind of get this right or this ability to do like a whole bunch of stuff. And very few people have the ability to be like, I'm going to do this, this, and this. And these three businesses don't even really relate to each other in any kind of real way. I can do an electric car. I can go put rockets into space and I can put chips in people's brains. They have this singular common element, which is this person. But outside of that, it's very rare that a person has the financing and the ability to be allowed to do like completely different things as big and bold as that.
Certainly,
so I'm jealous of that a little bit.
Yeah, no disagreement there. It's certainly different than the fellow who really knows how to hit a baseball or pitch a baseball and has a successful career. And then now what? Oh, I think I'll buy a car dealership. Right. Elon Musk is very, looking at these different industries. And you're right. His doing that pushes other competitors to take the next step. When Rocket came out, Rick brought up Rocket in the Super Bowl ad. I haven't really, I don't know the details specifically, but as I understand it, back then, most, if not all, companies had the technology that Rocket had. It was just that Rocket had this great marketing idea, and suddenly everybody is playing catch up when they really don't have to play catch up. But in order to convince their clients that, we have that technology just as much as Rocket does. But they were, they were the ones who put the ad on the Super Bowl. So suddenly it's catch up time.
Yeah.
Tesla, great example. But I am very hesitant about, if I think about somebody who's volatile controlling my internet access. We lost Brock because of some, 10 minutes ago because of, I don't know why Brock went away, but he went away.
It was technology.
I mean, the internet is a very fragile thing. I mean, heck, your power goes out. or you forget a password.
And then how debilitating that is.
Yeah,
right.
You lose your phone. I mean, I've seen people. In Philadelphia. I won't mention his name because he may be on this call, but he misplaced his phone during a session, and I am sure for the remainder of that session, he did not hear one word that the folks speaking were saying, because he was, he checked his coat pockets, he looked under his chair, he asked people around. I mean, he was just so driven because he misplaced his phone. So when you put, as Starlink grows in popularity and certainly appeals to distant places like Africa or over the South Pacific or Malaysia, wherever, certainly filling a need, but also when you rely on Elon Musk for your internet.
Yeah.
I
mean, it's almost as if you need a quasi public-private entity, to govern that, to ensure, continuity and stability. I don't know what other industries would come up with such a stupid idea, but
sounds risky.
Yes, sounds super risky, i.e. Fannie and Freddie. But but Rob, let me ask you a question about capital markets and in blockchain. What's interesting to me, and forget about the term. I know, like, blockchain is such a overused hype term, but ultimately speaking, doesn't it seem backwards to you that if I'm an originator and you're an investor, that we come to some agreement on paper that if I underwrite it in a certain way, if I give you within these certain parameters, you're going to give me a certain price for that piece of paper, right? Without you having seen it, you have no idea what's in my pipeline. We just come to that term, and then as I give you more volume, you'd give me better pricing. But you're giving me the box, and you're giving me sort of the round hole, and I need to sort of fit it, right? It seems to me that, like, a more transparent marketplace where investors could literally see from the like, if Rob Chrisman, the investor, could literally see myself as the originator in my loans from the moment in time I pull credit, for the moment of time I do the appraisal changes. Like, if you had visibility to the manufacturing of the loan, like full transparency of that, right? All the way through from cradle to grave, from origination to funding, it seems to me that your confidence in that paper would go up. It's not just the raw data points you're getting. You saw how the sausage is made, and you'd probably give me a better price for that. Now, if I didn't, let's say I didn't know Rob Chrisman, but as the investor, but let's say I put it out to a global marketplace where all these investors could have access to that, taking out the PII, like the individual, consumer identifiers, but some bank in Sweden or some bank in Japan or some bank in Saudi Arabia can say, oh, I see Rock Mortgage is originating, a pulled credit on this individual in Virginia, originated and there's 5,000 loans just like that, that have this FICO, DTI, all the parameters. It seems like if there was some kind of view in that, rather than after the fact, like I'm throwing this piece of paper over the fence, you do a quick QC of it and say, okay, got it. It meets inspection. It meets what we agreed to. And then I'm going to pay you and buy off your line. It seems to me that if there was transparency from the very point in time that I did it in the beginning, investors would buy that off the line a nanosecond after you closed and funded it. Because they've seen it. There's no QC needed. They've seen it from beginning to end. Is that just a pipe dream? Like, why doesn't that exist? Like, I don't understand why that doesn't exist.
Rick, I mean, that is such a complicated question. That is so complicated. I don't even know where to start. But first of all, if you are a money manager in Taipei and you are looking at Japanese bonds, you're looking at South African bonds, you're looking at mortgage-backed securities from the United States, you're looking at treasury securities, you're looking at a myriad of investment opportunities, ways to put your money to work. Do you have the time or inclination to look at the Jones loan and the Smith loan and the Thompson loan? You, as a consumer, Rick, you can go to a meat packing plant in Kansas and watch the slaughter process and watch them turning, Bessie into your hamburgers. Are you going to take the time and energy to go to that meat packing plant? You can go on a wine tasting. You can take a tour of a distillery or a winery, and that's fun and it's social and it's enjoyable. But do you want to really take the time and effort to track an individual barrel of wine and do that? Because you're going to be drinking it. So like it would make sense that you would want to know exactly where that came from and exactly how it was manufactured and what kind of conditions it was in while it was being aged. But how often do we do that? I go to McDonald's and I get a double cheeseburger. I trust McDonald's, to give me, a piece of cheese. I don't know where that cheese came from. What chemicals went into that cheese, how that burger, the bun, the pickles, the Diet Coke. I've never, I've been to a Coca-Cola bottling plant, but I don't, it's like, holy smokes, where can you start? And yeah, transparency for investors makes a lot of sense. And yeah, they give the mortgage banking community a box to originate loans into, and there are reps and warrants that investor is trusting that originator to originate the Tompkin loan or the Nguyen loan based on those specifications. But that investor doesn't have the time to go meet Fred Nguyen to make sure that Fred was handled appropriately by the loan officer and that the pool was, the loan was underwritten correct. It's so complicated that you could spend, sorry, I'm really ranting here. I know
this is perfect.
We're running a little bit short on time, but if you look at, I think it was Adam Smith, in one of the groundbreaking book on the economy, you talk about making a pin, right? Like a pin, like you put in a bulletin board, a pin, and how hard it is, how impossible it would be for us to make all of our own pins to put in bulletin boards, because to make our own pins and then to make our own cars and to make our own food and to do this and do that, you just have to rely on this supply chain and these manufacturers who specialize in making pins or making mortgages that, in theory, sure, it'd be nice for that money manager in Taipei to know the history of every loan and make sure the appraisal was correct and make sure this, and they just can't. They just can't. So I'll get off my stump.
I just thought it might be interesting because, a pen's not risk-based pricing, right? In like whether it's, 5,000 mortgages or an industry of 6 or 7 million mortgages, it's ultimately the pricing is based on a risk assessment and different models of default rates and so on. But if you in fraud, right, and in operational failures by the mortgage company, so there's a lot of factors that sort of get bundled into the risk assessment around the pricing of that particular bulk of product. Right?
I think it.
So if there's a way of saying, hey, here, let's minimize the risks, because we feel if we enable you greater transparency. In some, it could be an automated way where you're doing you're kind of a data poll and you're sort of seeing it. In some ways, if you could pick up an extra 30, 40, 50 basis points, because I know, I had some aggregated way of seeing how all these individual loans were made. And I want them all. I want to go to a cross country and say, I want all those loans when they close and fund. I'll take them all. And then it becomes a bidding war prior to closing on that particular loan.
I know Jeremy wants to talk, but Rick, have you ever seen Portlandia? Have you ever seen the episode with Colin the chicken in Portlandia? It's like, hey, what I see chickens on the menu today. Have you seen that? Where chicken's on the menu? Oh, tell me about the chicken. Oh, it's a whatever. Oh, where was it raised? Oh, it was raised here. Oh, really? And was it a nice chicken? Was it a happy chicken? can we just keep our table and we're going to go out to the farm and look to see where Colin the chicken was raised before we eat it. Now, a chicken is not risk-based pricing, but I've heard, and I don't know if this is true, but every sentence in a rental car agreement was because somebody screwed up or somebody did something wrong. And so they had to put that sentence in there so that, the new renter wouldn't screw up or wouldn't try to do something, pull the wool over the eyes of the rental car company. I've never read a rental car agreement. I just kind of get the car and I use it and I give it back and then I go on my way. If the more transparency, that's great. That's transparent. I can read that rental car agreement. I can read the note. I can read the deed of trust. I can read the Fannie Mae underwriting guidelines. Do I? No.
Yeah.
I don't know. Sorry. Well, I should shut up. Jeremy,
that's right.
You've been very patient.
You were making the point. You and I were on the same page. Like, Rick, I would encourage you to think of two sides of the same coin. On one side of the coin is like they want, I think, plausible deniability for what actually happened in the manufacturing process of the loan. I think a lot of investors pay to not know how income is calculated, to not know how assets are calculated, because it's such a subjective problem that actually there is often more income, more assets, or it doesn't show the same kind of risk base that we've put it in relative to gross income. Like, I actually think, whether they know it or not, a lot of investors are paying to not have it be net income, to not have it be how much does a person actually afford a house. It's like, no, keep me out of that. I don't actually want to know what's going on. I'll just buy the asset. To Rob's point about the chicken. On the other side of that coin, though, is there's a public company comp. When you become a public company, everybody sees everything. There's a subjectivity to what the CEO and the CFO talk about on earnings calls, but it's highly regulated. It's highly visible. Every analyst gets to decide, and they buy shares in what they like and they sell shares in what they don't like, or they stay away from it. So there is, on the other side of the coin, to your point, Rick, the potential to bring so much transparency to it that RMBS becomes the same thing, so to speak, where it's public, you buy what you buy, you pass on what you don't, because you have enough data to make that decision, similar to the insights of public companies.
My only point where I would say you guys might be wrong on this is that, like, Burns Steakhouse in Tampa, Florida, amazing steakhouse, best steak I've ever had, incredible, right? Family-owned company. I don't know if you guys have ever been, but you guys should definitely get a steak there one day. It's a total experience. And what they do, they'll take customers. No, it's expensive. Like, you'll spend, $400 or $500 a plate. And so if you have 4 people, you'll spend $2,000, $3,000, for a meal. But part of how they do that is they make it a major experience, and they bring you through the kitchen and they show you, this is where we grow our parsley. And this is, you can go to our farm if you want. If you can go to our farm if you want to actually look at, Betty the cow, who's soon going to be, on someone's plate come Monday. It's an amazing experience. At the IMB in New Orleans, a group of us went out to dinner at a French restaurant. They did the same thing. They walked us through the kitchen. We went, we sat down. You were there at the dinner, Brock.
No, that was interesting. Going through all the chefs are,
but it was inexpensive. It was
involved. Yeah.
The dinner was paid for by Truve, thank God. But it was
no.
It was a very expensive dinner.
The dinner was paid for by their clients.
Oh, yes, that's true. That is true. That's true. So that's why I think there is trust and transparency, and I do think there's a premium in that kind of transparency. May not so. I think Robin Kozelka seems to agree with you, Jeremy and Rob, about how how the investor doesn't care about how the cow is, or how the cow is made, or how the loan is. They
don't care. They don't care until they're held responsible for something going wrong.
Yeah, well, that gets to Jeremy's point, and when something goes wrong, then they can kind of say, the ASF can say those originators who are making all these mortgages are screwing up and ruin our party on the securitization side of the fence, I guess.
Yeah, there's
You
some
know,
of it there's
dodging
some
the
of
sun
there's some
here.
of it that you're choosing not to know, probably. You know, in some of these cases. Yeah.
I didn't say it was a deal breaker. I was just saying it's a consideration in how this thing matures. But yeah. Anyway,
We
Rob,
have
thank you so
run
much.
out of time.
Thank you, Rob, for being here. It's always great. I
we
appreciate
can
our
talk about this.
conversations. I would love to keep talking about it. I think we will in the future. So we'll keep the conversation going.
Thank you very much for
Thanks for
having me
being here.
on.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us on Real Fridays, Rob.
Brock, you gotta do better. You know, you keep interrupting us. We could barely get a word in edgewise, but
I don't know. I just like listening to Rick talk sometimes.
don't we all? Don't we all? All right, guys.
Thanks again. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Talk soon.
All right. Bye.